Well, I spent some time when I was trying to work on this week's sermon trying to be subtle and figure out a nice way to sneak into a point. But I'm not very subtle, and I'm not really good at sneaking, so here goes. There's been a lot of things in the news recently about Christians wanting to preserve their ability to not associate with people whose lives don't reflect their interpretation of Christian values. I happen to think that those Christians are doing Christianity wrong. And I think that today's gospel backs up my position. You see, there's been this trend lately, at least among the more vocal of Christians in our society, to try to force Christian values on people who aren't Christian. Now, I would consider this a holdover from an era called the Christendom era. And that's just kind of what it sounds like. It started roundabouts AD 380 when Emperor Theodosius I issued the Edict of Thessalonica, which formally recognized Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. And it all went downhill from there. And I mean that somewhat jokingly, but somewhat seriously, unfortunately, too. Because not long after that, about 150 years or so, the Roman Empire collapsed under the weight of its own excess and some help from some barbarian invasions. Germanic invasions. I don't want to be discriminatory against any Germanic peoples. When the Roman Empire fell, it left a power vacuum in the western half of Europe. And there was only one entity that was organized enough to take over: the church. And what happened as time went on is the church became the authority when it came to just about everything. Now, that might seem like a good thing, but there's an old saying that often gets floated around that says that power corrupts. And unfortunately, that's what happened to the church as time went on. Their power went to their head a little bit, and they did some things that we shouldn't be proud of. And then something happened around about the mid-16th century. We might know a little something about that. A monk, a little minor revolution. And what happened after the Reformation, which is of course what I'm talking about, is the power of the church started to decline. And it started slowly, and it started almost not noticeably, but the church started to lose influence with the rest of society. And this started to scare people. And this kind of thing is continuing today as we can look out and see that the church is losing influence in our society. Now, there's a couple ways to deal with this, and I think that the way that a lot of Christians have been dealing with it, well, it doesn't make Christians look very good. And I don't mean that in the sense that we should please everyone and make everyone happy. I mean it in the sense that it doesn't reflect well on the person whom we're supposed to be representing. You see, I went to a completely unreliable source to find out some things. There's a website out there, it's called Yahoo Answers. It is a cesspool of just completely unreliable, unsourced, opinionated material, which was perfect for my sources, because I wanted to see what folks said about Christianity. So I found a question on Yahoo Answers that was, what are some adjectives to describe Christians? They weren't pretty. The top answer on this Yahoo Answers page listed things like self-righteous, smug, bigoted, willfully ignorant. Other answers included things like judgmental, hateful, etc. I mean, these are the kinds of things that people view Christians as. And in viewing Christians that way, they also view God that way. If we're supposed to represent God and they see Christians as this, they must see God the same way. Logically, that's just how it works. So this doesn't look good for us. And it's kind of this last grasp to regain influence that we're losing. And this is where our gospel lesson today starts to make me kind of sad. Because Jesus shows us exactly how to deal with people that we would consider sinners. And we haven't been following Jesus' example. You see, Jesus was finding himself in some trouble. The Pharisees were starting to put the heat on him, so he did what he usually does when the Pharisees start to get extra mad at him. He leaves town. And he found himself in the Samaritan region. Now, you might remember how well Jews and Samaritans get along. I'll give you a hint, they hate each other. And so we have this group of Jews hanging out in a Samaritan town, and it's probably rather tense. But Jesus is hanging out by a well. The disciples go into town to buy food, and a Samaritan woman shows up in the middle of the day to get some water from the well, and Jesus says, "Hey, while you're getting some water, could you get me some too?" This is weird, by the way. The woman somewhat rightly says, "What do you mean, can I get you some water? You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan, and I'm a woman. We're not supposed to be associating on any level right now. And you want me to get you water?" Now, of course, Jesus starts to talk about the water of eternal life. And finally, Jesus casually mentions, "Oh, why don't you bring your husband over?" The woman says, "Oh, I don't have one." And Jesus says, "Oh, well, that's true. You don't have one, but you've had 5 and you're living with the 6th guy." Now, notice what Jesus doesn't say when he talks to this woman. He never says that the woman is a sinner. He never says that what she's doing is horrible. He never says that she should turn her life upside down and change what she's doing. What he says is, "I have something better, because I have eternal life that I want to give you." And then he told her what worshiping God was really like, because at this point she's getting nervous because she's going, "You Jews say we should worship at the temple, and we say we should worship on the mountain. Why don't we fight about that for a little bit? That's more comfortable." I mean, so Jesus then says, again, not changing the subject, it's not about where you worship, it's about how you worship inside. And then Jesus finally admits when the woman says, "Oh, well, none of this makes sense to me. The Messiah will explain it eventually." And then Jesus, I could almost picture the look on Jesus' face. This is kind of like almost mischievous grin. "Oh, that's me." Because it's funny. "Oh, the Messiah's going to explain it to us." He just did. Now, it's interesting to me, though, because we've gotten away from this kind of talking about God. We've gotten away from saying, these are the good bits, and we've started focusing on, these are the bad bits. Can you imagine how it would go if people's stereotype of a Christian had encountered this woman? Probably not well. But Jesus just says, "I have eternal life for you." There's no sense of, I have to clean up my life in order to come to church. How many times have you heard someone say that? "Oh, I'll come to church, but don't I have to quit smoking first? Don't I have to quit drinking first? Don't I have to stop doing this, this, and this?" No. The church is full of broken people. That's the whole point. We Lutherans, right? What are we? We're sinners and saints all at the same time. We're both. And there's this sense that everything that Jesus did when he was on earth was to bring broken people together and say, "I can fix you." Not in the sense of changing broken things, but of saying, I have a better way. I have a way that doesn't bring death, but that brings life. I have a way that isn't so concerned with details and rules, but one that is about following me. The church now is a place where we should be bringing life to people. We should be telling them that there is a better way and not spending so much time focusing on sin. Because no one wants to hear that they're a sinner. No one wants to hear everything that they're doing wrong. When I hear the statement from the woman, come see a man who told me everything I ever did, I don't hear any undertone of judgment. I hear the sense of, he knew everything I did, but he loved me anyways. He knew everything I did, but he didn't judge me for it. And that's what God came to earth to do. Remember the second half of the football verse that we read last week? For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Everybody stops there, but the second half, the verse right after it is just as important. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. And that should be our focus. Not sharing bad news of sin and punishment, but sharing good news. The good news that, as Paul says, that God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. While we were sinners, the door was opened for eternal life. While we were sinners, God showed us a better way, a way of love, a way of peace, and a way of his truth.